I rarely travel out of town, so this was one of the few times I had to stay somewhere other than a friend or family's house. The area I needed to stay in was quite small, and most of the hotels didn't look very inviting. To my surprise, there was a single home listed on Airbnb. It was my first time using the site, but the house looked decent, much better than the available hotels. I requested the dates, and within a few minutes, the place was booked. The following week, I embarked on the 14-hour drive to the town, arriving well at the night. The town seemed almost deserted compared to where I was used to living. All the houses' lights were off, stores closed, and no people or cars in sight. Of course, it was the middle of the night, so I didn't expect a small town like this to be bustling, but the eerie silence left an unsettling first impression. The street leading to the Airbnb was dark, winding through a forested neighborhood until I reached the house. It was one of the few with porch and outdoor lights on, but I noticed a light coming from one upstairs window. I figured the previous guest must have left it on by mistake, so I didn't think much of it. I got inside, locked the door, and placed my belongings in a corner. Later, I decided to turn off the light in the spare bedroom upstairs. I thought it strange that the light was still on, but I turned it off without giving it much thought. Then I went to the main bedroom to settle in for the night. I had booked the place for 2 nights, even though I was staying for only 1, as I needed to be there late into the following day. I had been in bed for about an hour, unable to sleep, when I heard a thud coming from the walls of the house. I sat up quickly, my heart racing, and tried to figure out the cause of the noise. I couldn't come up with any ideas. I got up to investigate, opened the door, and peered into the dark upstairs hallway. The house was quiet now, no more thuds, just the creaking sounds as the house swayed in the wind. I quietly shut the door and waited, feeling an eerie presence. Soft creaks started moving through the floorboards in the other room, and they gradually approached the hallway. The creaking continued towards my door. I pressed my ear against the door, listening as the creaking reached the hallway and then moved closer to my door. I was in shock, and it took me a moment to realize that these were footsteps. My heart raced as they approached my door. I held the door handle tightly to prevent it from turning, and a moment later, I felt it being forced down. I resisted, and there was a brief pause before the handle was forced down hard, causing the door to swing half open. I caught a glimpse of a man's face on the other side, his eyes filled with anger. We struggled briefly, and I somehow managed to push the door back into its latch and lock it. The man on the other side tried to open it, but eventually ran downstairs and out of the house, shouting unpleasant words at me. I was still catching my breath and called 911. For such a small town, the police arrived promptly. The Airbnb owner continued with the case after I left, but I wish I had kept up with it. The man's desperate attempt to enter my room and his rage left me deeply disturbed. Airbnbs probably won't be my first choice for accommodation anytime soon. I booked an Airbnb in a neighboring city over 3 years ago. I had a job interview the next morning, and it seemed convenient to stay there for the night. The house was in a nice neighborhood, but when I arrived, I was surprised to find a woman inside. She introduced herself as another guest who would be staying here for a few days. It was unexpected, but I thought maybe it was a shared rental. I decided to check with the owner later. I went to my room to freshen up and eat. As I entered the kitchen, the woman approached me again. She engaged in conversation, asking personal questions and being quite friendly. The conversation took an uncomfortable turn as she began flirting with me. I was in my early 20s, and this made me uneasy. I tried to avoid being rude, but was visibly disinterested. She persisted and even invited me to her room. When I declined, her friendly demeanor turned into a scowl. Suddenly, I received a message from the owner, stating that there shouldn't be anyone else there and to call the police if there was. I looked back at the woman, and before I could react, I heard heavy footsteps and the door down the hallway being thrown open. I sprinted for the front door, passing a man who was charging toward me. I left the house, got into my car, and sped away. The police arrived later, but both the man and the woman had disappeared. I was thankful that I had left my belongings behind because it only raised more questions about their intentions. A few months back, I booked a cozy-looking apartment through Airbnb for a weekend getaway. The pictures on the listing were all sunshine and rainbows, a modern space in a bustling part of the city. Seemed perfect, right? Wrong. Upon arriving, the first red flag was that the host wasn't there to greet us. The key was in a lockbox, and we were left to find our own way. The apartment itself was nothing like the photos. It had this unsettling, abandoned vibe, and the air felt heavy. We tried to shake off the weird feeling, attributing it to travel stress. As night fell, things took a dark turn. Strange noises echoed through the apartment, footsteps in empty rooms, doors creaking open on their own. We brushed it off as an old building settling, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The unease escalated when we noticed a locked door in the corner of the living room that wasn't mentioned in the listing. Unable to shake off the growing discomfort, we decided to investigate. After a bit of searching, we found a key that opened the mysterious door. What awaited us was a room filled with bizarre symbols and creepy artifacts, definitely not something you'd expect in an Airbnb. Fear set in, and we immediately contacted Airbnb support, explaining the unnerving situation. They were quick to respond and advised us to leave the property immediately. As we packed our bags, we heard whispers in the empty hallway, and the lights flickered ominously. We found alternative accommodation and reported the incident to local authorities. The Airbnb listing mysteriously disappeared from the platform, leaving us with an unsettling feeling about what we had unknowingly stumbled upon.